My name is Gracie Jones, and for 8 years, my family told everyone that I was a liar. My father stood in front of 320 people at our church and called me mentally unstable. He accused me of stealing a scholarship and warned everyone that I was dangerous around children. My mother sat beside him and said nothing, while my older sister Chloe watched me with a smile. That afternoon, my father threw me out of his house with only $280 and a gray backpack. I walked away believing I had lost my family, my reputation, and the future I had worked for. But what I didn't know was that someone had been quietly keeping evidence of the truth. 8 years later, that evidence would come from the last person I expected. A 15-year-old girl inside my own family would uncover a secret that changed everything. And before the story ended, the people who destroyed my name would finally have to face it. It started in August 2017, when I was 31 and living with my parents in Springfield, Illinois. 3 days before everything happened, I came home from my job at a small coffee shop. I had been working all summer, saving every dollar because I wanted a different life. That afternoon, I placed a cream-colored envelope on the kitchen counter. It was from the Beacon Educator Fellowship, and I could barely believe what it said. I had won $16,200 a year for 2 years to complete my master's degree in education. I had already been accepted into Boston College and had a teaching opportunity waiting for me. For the first time, I felt like my future belonged to me instead of my family. But when my sister Chloe read the letter, her expression suddenly changed. She looked at me and quietly asked, "You know this scholarship is connected to Uncle James, right?" I barely remembered Uncle James because I had been a child when he died. My father had never spoken about him, not even once during my entire childhood. But Chloe knew exactly who he was, and she immediately took the letter into my father's study. The two of them stayed behind that locked door for almost an hour. After that, my father stopped looking me in the eyes. On Sunday morning, I sat in the third pew at First Cornerstone Community Church. The church was packed, and my father had been an elder there for more than 20 years. Then the pastor invited the elder board forward for what he called a matter of community concern. My father stepped behind the pulpit, holding a folded sheet of paper. I had no idea that he was about to destroy my life in front of everyone. He told the congregation that his daughter had chosen deception instead of truth. Then he accused me of stealing a scholarship that I had actually earned. But the worst part came when he pulled out pieces of an old journal I had written at 16. Those pages contained my private thoughts after my grandfather died. I had written about doubt, grief, and how lost I felt at the time. My father presented those words as proof that I was mentally unstable. Then he looked directly at the congregation and said I was dangerous and should never be near children. Nobody stood up for me. Nobody asked me what had really happened. My sister simply looked back at me with a sympathetic smile that I will never forget. I walked out through the side door while 320 people watched in silence. That afternoon, my father stood in my bedroom doorway and gave me one final choice. He told me that if I left, I could never come back through that door again. My mother stood behind him crying, but she still didn't defend me. I packed a few clothes into my gray backpack and took the $280 I had saved from my coffee shop tips. I also took a small USB drive containing my scholarship documents and 3 photographs of Uncle James. Then I walked out of the house at 4:17 in the afternoon. I walked to the bus station and bought a one-way ticket to Boston. I had no apartment waiting, no friends waiting, and no family waiting for me. During the long journey, an elderly woman named Odessa sat beside me and noticed how frightened I was. She shared her food with me and told me something I would remember for the rest of my life. She looked at my empty hands and said, "You're too thin to be brave. Eat." It was such a simple sentence, but it was the first kindness I had received that day. When I finally reached Boston, I spent my first night near the Boston Public Library. I had less than $100 left and nowhere to sleep. The next morning, I went straight to the Beacon Educator Fellowship office. I expected them to tell me there had been a mistake. Instead, the assistant director looked at my documents and confirmed that the scholarship was legitimate. She even helped arrange temporary housing while I prepared to begin my graduate program. For the first time since leaving Illinois, I realized that my father couldn't control my future. I wrote 4 words in a notebook that night: I do not go back. Boston wasn't easy, but slowly, I began building a life of my own. I found a job at a used bookstore owned by a man named Peter Callahan. He gave me work when I had almost nothing and never asked me what I owed him. I studied education during the day, worked whenever I could, and lived on very little. I eventually became an English teacher and started helping students who felt invisible or unheard. Years passed, and I stopped thinking about my family every single day. I built friendships, found mentors, and created a home filled with people who actually cared about me. Eventually, I founded a nonprofit called Second Chapter Boston to help young people facing difficult family situations. I never planned to become famous, and I certainly never expected my story to reach millions. But in 2024, I gave a talk about being silenced by the people who were supposed to protect me. That talk eventually reached millions of views, and my story began spreading across the internet. I had a growing nonprofit, a book deal, and a life I was proud of. But there was one question I still couldn't answer. Why had my father hated that scholarship so much? In 2019, I finally contacted a woman connected to the Beacon Educator Fellowship. Her name was Claire, and she was connected to my father's brother, James. She told me the truth my father had hidden for years. James had been a teacher, and he believed deeply in helping children receive an education. He had also confronted my father's church years earlier over the way it treated a vulnerable teenager. After that confrontation, the brothers stopped speaking to each other. James died in 2002, and Claire later created the Beacon Educator Fellowship in his name. The scholarship wasn't stolen, manipulated, or secretly given to me by my family. I had been selected by an independent committee because I qualified. My father couldn't accept that his brother's legacy had helped his own daughter. So instead of admitting the truth, he destroyed my reputation. I finally understood why the scholarship had triggered such a violent reaction from him. I gathered every document proving what had really happened and put them into a folder. Then I placed that folder in a filing cabinet and refused to open it again. I thought the story was finished. I was wrong. In March 2026, my grandmother watched one of my talks online from a senior living center in Illinois. She recognized me immediately, even though 8 years had passed. She mentioned my name during a family dinner, and my sister Chloe searched for me online that same night. Within an hour, Chloe had found my nonprofit, my videos, my book announcement, and my upcoming event in Boston. But Chloe wasn't simply looking for her lost sister. She was running a Christian lifestyle account with thousands of followers. She had built an online image around family, faith, forgiveness, and perfect relationships. And suddenly, she saw an opportunity to turn our reunion into content. She contacted me and started calling me sweetheart, as if 8 years of cruelty had never happened. Then my mother called, followed by relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Within 24 hours, I received 27 messages from people connected to my family. 24 of those messages repeated the same 3 words: come back home. But 3 messages came from a number I didn't recognize. The first said, I believe you. The second said, I know what she's doing. The third said, please don't come back yet, I have something to show you. I asked who was sending them, and the answer stopped me completely. The person was Sophie, Chloe's 15-year-old daughter. She told me she had been watching my talks for months. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. I think my mom is going to hurt you. I have proof. That was the moment I realized this reunion was never about forgiveness. Sophie showed me a folder containing dozens of files she had secretly collected. There were emails between Chloe and a talent agent discussing a $58,000 sponsorship campaign. The campaign was literally built around the idea of a dramatic reunion between Chloe and her lost sister. There were messages discussing cameras, filming angles, and how emotional the reunion should look. But then Sophie showed me something even more disturbing. She had discovered archived messages from 2010, written by Chloe when she was only 20 years old. In those messages, Chloe admitted that she had found my private journal. She said she was saving pages from it for the right moment. The journal had been written years before my father publicly accused me of being unstable. Suddenly, I understood that the humiliation at church had never been based on the truth. Chloe had kept my private words for years, waiting for the perfect opportunity to use them against me. And now, she was preparing to use our reunion for money and social media attention. Sophie didn't want to destroy her mother. She simply didn't want to grow up inside the same kind of lie I had escaped. Her father, Ryan, supported her decision to tell the truth. I invited Sophie and Ryan to my upcoming event at the Boston Public Library. I didn't know what would happen that day, but I knew I couldn't control it. On May 9th, 2026, hundreds of people filled the hall for the Reclaiming Voices Symposium. Chloe arrived with her husband and a camera, ready to capture the reunion she had planned. Sophie arrived with her father and quietly took a seat near the front. When I walked onto the stage, I told the audience about the girl who had been called a thief. I told them about the scholarship, the church, the accusation, and the day I was thrown out. I never mentioned my father's name or identified the church. Then I said the sentence I had carried inside me for 8 years. They said I should never be allowed near children, so I built a place for the children they had already broken. The audience stood and applauded. Then Chloe walked toward the microphone with tears in her eyes. She gave the audience the performance she had prepared. She said she was my sister and asked me to forgive her and come back home. I looked at her and said forgiveness only means something when the person offering it can name what was done. Then I looked toward the front row and invited Sophie to speak. My 15-year-old niece walked to the microphone with both hands shaking. She told the room that her mother's reunion had been arranged for a $58,000 sponsorship deal. She said she had the emails to prove it. Then she revealed that her mother had kept my private journal for years, waiting for the right moment to use it. The entire room became silent. Sophie wasn't trying to destroy her mother. She was simply refusing to become another person, trapped inside the same lie. After Sophie finished, Chloe walked out of the hall without saying another word. Her husband followed her while still carrying the camera. The live stream continued, and hundreds of thousands of people eventually watched what happened. The sponsorship deal was canceled, and Chloe's carefully built online image collapsed. But the biggest revelation came a few days later, when my grandmother called me. She told me something she should have told me years earlier. The anonymous $50 money orders I had received every month for 3 years had come from her. She had secretly sent me $50 each month because she knew my father was watching everything in town. 36 times, she had chosen me without telling me. I sat there holding the phone, crying because someone had been quietly rooting for me all along. My grandmother said, "I hope you knew someone was choosing you." I told her I didn't know. She answered, "I know, baby, that's why I'm telling you now." A few days later, I flew to Illinois and met Sophie and Ryan. Sophie gave me 6 sunflowers and apologized for moving too quickly into my life. I told her she hadn't moved too quickly. She had moved exactly as fast as she needed to. For the first time, I realized something important about family. Sometimes the family you are born into is not the family that deserves you. My father never apologized, My mother never admitted what they had done. And I finally understood that I didn't need their apology to know the truth. I didn't need revenge either. Their own choices had already exposed them. The people who once told me I was dangerous now had to watch me build a life dedicated to helping children. The girl they tried to silence had become an educator, an author, and a protector of other young people. The sister they called unstable had built something stronger than their judgment. And the niece they never expected to question them became the person brave enough to tell the truth. I never went back to the house I was thrown out of. Instead, I built a new home surrounded by people who never required me to earn their love. So if you've ever been rejected by people who were supposed to protect you, remember this. Walking away doesn't always mean you lost your family. Sometimes it means you finally stopped losing yourself. And sometimes the truth takes years to surface, but that doesn't make it any less powerful. My father thought he was ending my story that Sunday in 2017. He was only ending the chapter where I believed his opinion defined me. 8 years later, my niece opened a door he thought he had locked forever. And behind that door was the truth, waiting patiently for its moment. If this story touched you, tell me in the comments. Would you forgive Gracie's family, or would you walk away for good? And if you enjoy emotional family stories, betrayal, karma, and powerful life lessons, subscribe to *** Karma Chronicles ***. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying the people who hurt you. It's building a life they can never take away.